Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And thank you so much for joining me this morning for our first State of Metro address, and also for being here this afternoon. I'm looking forward to working with each and one of you as we move the budget process forward. This is our first budget together, and I know it has a lot of great things in it. I want to give a shout out to Talia. Talia Lomax O'Neill is the finance director, and she deserves incredible credit for coming up with a new budget process this year. You know, Talia has been in Metro government for a while, and she could have just sat back and said, we're going to do things the same old way we do it. But because she is innovative and creative and entrepreneurial, she said there is a different and better way. And so you'll see that today as she talks you through what is in this budget. The budget that's being submitted to all of you today really does take advantage of our city's historic growth by directing resources to those in our community who need the most help. I started this budget process, as I mentioned, by asking our departments and agencies, for every dollar that you're talking about spending, what outcome does a taxpayer get for that dollar? I hope that you will support these priorities so that we can grow our city in a way that brings everyone along, and some that who have not had the benefit of our growth see that benefit. You've been very good stewards of our tax dollars with your oversight of all of the various Metro funds since we took office together last fall. And I know that you're going to continue to be diligent and work hard over the next couple of months as you work through this budget. Please know that my administration is here to help you in any way that you need, answer any questions about these budget recommendations. I know that together we can make a huge difference in the lives of Nashvillians, and I look forward to working with you. Talia's going to take you through the entire budget. I'm going to actually let her do that. You all, surprisingly enough, know that I actually know what's in it, so I don't need to sit here and listen again. But I'm thrilled to be back in this chamber, and thrilled to work with each one of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Barry. Thank you, Mayor. Although I would love to sit up here for the entire time, people who know me, I can't sit still that long, really. So I'm going to leave the mics on, and I will ask the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee when he's ready to come on up and take a seat. And once there are questions, you can run the mic at that point in time, since you'll be handling the budget process. Ms. Lomax O'Neill, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. And I really appreciate this very large audience in the back. I've been here 15 years. I don't know if the crowd has ever been that big. It really is truly a good day. I feel fortunate to be here today to present the budget to you from my first time. I will allow some questions when we get to the end, but I think you all are going to be extremely pleased with the mayor's budget recommendations. I want to thank the department heads, elected officials, and their staff. As the mayor mentioned, we have implemented some changes in the budget process this year, and they've been challenging, and the departments have been gracious with us, and they have really participated and embraced the new processes. And I do think that there's some new energy around the budget process that I have not seen in a long time. I want to thank, I know they're hiding back there in the back, but it's not just me that prepares this budget. The Office of Management and Budget staff are back there in the back. They have supported me for the last 15 years, and I can never go into a budget process without acknowledging all of their hard work for getting us to where we are. So if you guys would give them a round of applause, I'd appreciate it. And finally, I want to thank Mayor Barry for having the confidence in me to do this job and to help put together this budget, or take the lead on that, and for her leadership and vision. So first of all, we're going to go into the current year status. We are absolutely operating within current budget allocations, and we expect to finish the fiscal year well below budget. As you'll see later in this presentation, Growth in property and sales taxes are strong. We recently had rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, reaffirm our bond ratings, and we continue to grow our budget reserves. As we started this budget process, the budget instructions were very, very clear from the mayor. There would be no tax increase, and she has emphasized that today in her remarks. No reduction scenarios. Departments have not seen a budget without a reduction scenario in more than 10 years in this government. So that was huge, I think. We wanted to focus on long-term financial planning, which means we were not going to go in and incrementally look at the budget at one point in time and just grow it, but we were going to be thoughtful, and we were going to look at this from a 3-year long-term perspective. As a result of that, we had a lot of budget requests. Somewhere probably, the mayor talked about $120 million. We probably had somewhere between $200 and $300 million of budget requests, which we obviously could not fund everything. But that sets the stage for how we move forward in the outer years, because we couldn't get to everything in the first year. We looked at public investment plans, went to the Entrepreneur Center, had some very, very creative ideas. You're going to hear about some of the things that came out of those public investment plan meetings later in this presentation. She wanted collaboration and innovation, a little bit more than just the status quo. And what's not up here is she said to me early on in the process is that employees were going to be a priority in this budget, and we needed to make sure that they were taken care of. So to recap where her priorities are, and she has already discussed those earlier: education and youth, affordable housing and economic and development for all, transportation and infrastructure, and quality of life. You will see that this budget aligns with all of those priorities. So here we are, $2 billion budget, 6.1% increase over fiscal year 16. For comparison purposes, the FY16 budget was about a 4% increase over the prior year. This slide gives you a perspective on total budget growth for the last few years so that you can see we've ranged anywhere from $75 million or so to well in excess of $100 million a year on total budget growth. So where does all this money come from? This is the chart that everybody loves. And it's really interesting because generally these, where the money comes from and where the money goes to charts are static, and you don't see much shift in these percentages. But this year you're going to see a small shift in some of the categories. Local option sales tax is up. Last year it was 18.3%. Use of fund balance, noted here, is 3.4%. Last year was 3.8%. Grant and contributions are up to 18.6%, and everything else is up 11.6%, which means property tax actually went down as a percentage of the budget. Just an interesting observation. That just shows how the revenue growth is. So here's our revenue growth. We looked at these numbers, and we looked at them 2 times and 3 times and 4 times and 5 times because they were hard to believe when we started to look at the trends, because we've never really seen this type of revenue growth in the city. $121 million. Property taxes are up $33 million in this budget. Local option, 27.3, and so on. And I want to give you some perspective on those two from last year's budget. Last year, property taxes were up $6 million in the budget. This year, $33 million. Local option was up $35 million. This year, 27.3. So the sales, while we've got growth, it's not as significant as it was last year. Grants and contributions last year was $13.9 million. Now we're at 27.6. All other was at $19 million. This year we've got $32 million growth in other revenue categories, and that includes things like permitting, Codes alone is projecting a $6 million increase in their revenues. If you think about what the mayor talked about this morning about the building permits, that's a direct correlation to the economic development in this city. And it's not just a single category where we're seeing revenue growth, it's everywhere. It's everything from alcoholic beverage privilege tax to franchises, business tax. All of those things that are economic drivers to this city are seeing tremendous growth in revenues. Okay? Hotel occupancy, motor vehicle licenses. Just think about, as this city grows, all of the different revenue sources that are impacted. To put this into perspective, I thought that this was an interesting chart to share with you all because it really is historic. This is typical budgeted revenue growth in the city over the past few years. It's ranged from $49 million in FY13 to now $121 million. In FY13, we had a property tax increase of 53 cents that generated $100 million. We've never seen, so this type of revenue growth is happening outside of any property tax adjustment. I mean, it's pretty compelling when you start to look at the numbers. And I really would say that these are dividends that are clearly paying off from prior investments that have been made in this city. And when you look out the window, you can now start to see that revenue coming into the city. Okay? So I want to show you property tax. You'll see here property tax growth is about 3.5%. Generally, in a general year, we tell people it's about 2%. So that's very significant and higher than what we've seen in prior years. Sales tax growth, 7.5% growth. In a typical year, we might see 3 to 5%. It's a good time to be finance director in Nashville. I really do keep telling people that. It's really a good time to be finance director. Here in this next chart, I wanted to share with you, we are using some fund balance in the budget, but we are driving down the use of that fund balance, and this chart represents the percentage of the budget. For instance, in the first line, last year, use of fund balance was about 6.1%. We're growing that now to 7.4% in this budget, and so on and so forth. I won't read you every one of those lines. It's there for your viewing. Okay. These are the actual amounts. Go back, Zach. That are in the budget. Last year was 73.9, and this year 71.9. So now here's the next slide. Look where we're projected to be at the end of this fiscal year on operating fund balances, over $200 million. Okay. And that is definitely a result of those revenues. So where the money goes, this chart hasn't changed. So these priorities really haven't shifted. If you think about a $2 billion budget, to shift these percentages, you've really got to move the needle in a big way. So you will see that education is still at 41% of the budget and some of those other larger categories. Now, to be more specific, this is where your $121 million in new revenue growth is going. Debt service. There's a lot of talk about whether or not we were going to be able to, I think, meet our debt commitments. Clearly, you're meeting our debt commitments. That's first. Schools has a recommendation of $33.3 million. Employee compensation, $30 million for the employees. And I'm going to go into more detail about what that covers. And then everything else, remember that $200 million number I told you all about? To do everything else, we had about $39 million and had to make some choices about what would be funded this year. This is just a chart that we like to show you around debt service because it's a good marker of our debt service budget as compared to our operating. So we feel like we're in a good place there, still within a comparable range of about 10%, which is where we try to stay. And there is a requirement that we file with you all an annual debt report with the budget, and you all will get that today after this presentation. And it has pages and pages and pages of detail on our debt obligations. So now I'm going to jump to the employee investments. $29 million in total. The compensation is 28.5, and then the Veterans Day holiday is about $1 million. So I want to recap for you all kind of what's happened with employees in the past. This is the next slide. We've not been steady. We've not been consistent with raises for employees over the last 8 years or so. There were years where like in FY 2010, employees didn't get anything. In some years, an employee got a lump sum with a $1,500 cap. In 2009, only if you were an increment employee did you get something. So there were winners and losers, I think, in most of these pay plans, and we started to make to have some kind of impact on that in the current year. But FY17 is going to be different, significantly different. The mayor mentioned the 3.1% COLA. Yes, that is in the mayor's budget recommendation, but also in the budget recommendation is 3% for open range employees. Also in the budget is funding for increments for employees. So an increment employee would receive an increment plus the COLA, which is well in excess of 6%. Okay? And then along with that, the HR department has wrapped up the compensation study that was started by Deloitte a couple of years ago, and those recommendations are also in this budget. Many of those recommendations focus on the trades and labor and entry-level staff and some of our lowest paid employees, and it's based on market data. So many of our lowest paid employees are going to receive additional adjustments. There will be some employees probably within the metro government that receive in excess of 10%, well over that in compensation improvements. And you all need to say thank you to the mayor for that. Employees are truly valued in this budget. And I don't know if Veronica's back there, but she and her team worked really, really hard on this study over the past couple of years, and they deserve some credit for everything that they've done to put together the plan and to shepherd that through Civil Service Commission. So now, I'm not going to cover everything that is in the recommended budget, but there are some select improvements that we do want to touch on today. We want to talk about schools. They have the mayor's recommended a 4.1% increase of $33 million. They requested a 5.2% increase of $42 million. What the mayor has recommended, she did include the pay plan and these other, jump to the next slide for me, Zach. These other items that were in their requests. So they've got funding for the employee compensation, inflationary increases that requested, as well as a number of new initiatives that they have. And what we are going to ask that they do is we are providing startup money for many of the English language learners and literacy initiatives that were proposed as they search for a new director. The board had recommended or requested that we use $27 million of reserve fund balances. And we just didn't want to go that deep into the reserves. So we have appropriated from fund balance $16 million, which is equivalent to this year's budget. and felt that that would give them the startup cost to initiate those programs without going too deeply into their fund balance. This is a snapshot of their budget growth over the last few years, just to give you some perspective. Now I'm going to shift to some other youth programs and services. The mayor has $2.6 million dedicated toward youth programs. Employment, there's at least a little over $1 million in the mayor's budget to provide jobs for youth in this community. Those will be in parks. They will be managed through NCAC. I think NCAC may be reaching out to some other organizations to help place people. But some significant, and those kids are going to be put to work this summer. After school programs, there's an increase for NASA to increase the number of days from 4 weeks. They provide services for 24 weeks right now for after school programs, and they're going to increase that to 28 weeks. Arts, there's a program in there for restorative justice and the arts for them to work with kids. There's a college readiness program for a complete initiative program. And youth violence, there's some funding that has been recommended within this total for juvenile court, as well as juvenile court clerk and the police department to deal with our youth issues, youth violence issues. Everybody's seen this number, heard that number a few times, $16 million. You'll see a $10 million commitment of new dollars in the budget for affordable housing. Public investment plans, PIPs. We all had a lot of fun with the PIPs, but the mayor has committed $1 million to fund these public investment plans. 34 plans were submitted, valuing $16 million of operating dollars and $35 million of capital requests. Everything couldn't be funded this year. So we have 14 plans were actually approved, and then we are, within the context of that million, we are setting up an innovation investment fund that departments that did submit PIPs will be able to go in and incubate those ideas and to take them to the next level because they had many of them had a short window, and we asked them to do a lot. So we felt like we needed to have some resources available to help them more fully develop those plans. Next. Lots of questions about operating subsidies. The farmers market is recommended for $1 million subsidy. That $1 million subsidy is not coming from the general fund. Instead, it fulfills our commitment when you all approve the lease, the sale of the property with the state, that we would set that money aside as an operating reserve and for capital. So this $1 million is coming from that allocation from the state to provide them that operating subsidy. Municipal auditorium is budgeted for $400,000 subsidy. If you all recall, we did a supplemental appropriation for them a couple weeks ago, and their current year subsidy was a little over $400,000. So what this does is this allows them to have that budget availability now, so they don't have to come back at the end of the budget year and ask for that. And the state fair submitted a balanced budget based on their revenues. They have not asked for any additional support from the city or other resources. Hospital Authority has asked for a flat subsidy. They have indicated to me that they will not need any additional funding in fiscal year 17. MTA, $2 million. Nolensville Bus Rapid Transit. We actually started this in the current fiscal year, so this provides funding to complete that for a full year. A Thompson Lane feeder service and maintenance, and again, planning for the first and last mile. And what that means is the MTA has indicated that there are people that need to get to the bus, but they can't get to the bus. So they are looking at innovative ways, or maybe engaging with an Uber or a Lyft that might provide first or last mile service to give somebody a way or an opportunity to get to the bus stop, because right now they're so far away they can't get to the bus stop. So they are going to be doing some planning to try to pilot some of those initiatives in the upcoming year. This is a slide on MTA subsidy history. Public safety, fire, $1.5 million. EMS, 16 paramedics and 8 EMTs. They should put 2 new ambulances on the street. Fire prevention, long-awaited uniform allowances that we've all been hearing about for years with the fire department, and some quality improvement staffing for EMS and medical records that they've requested. The police department gets resources for domestic violence, the crime lab, special events overtime, and again, additional resources to work in the areas of youth. Libraries. We're going to fully fund the regional locations that opened in FY16 and open up 5 more locations in 17. Those five locations are Richland Park, Thompson Lane, Inglewood, Donaldson, and Goodlettsville. The health department, lots of resources for youth, food and facility inspections, vital records, and vaccinations. You'll see a common theme in here with the mayor on youth proposals. Transportation and infrastructure, codes and planning. We talked about all that astronomical growth. Well, somebody's got to do the work. So planning and codes, we've got some recommendations in here for them. We talked about MTA, parks. We've bought a lot of land and we've opened up a whole lot of parks. Now we've got to maintain it and make sure we've got the grass mowed, custodians, we keep it clean and keep it welcoming for the city. And public works. I mean, those are the important things. Contractual increases, road and paving repairs, and cleaning crews, the basics. Planning and Public Works came to the administration and both provided some proposals for some fee increases. Right after this presentation, you all should be getting a memo from them explaining their proposed increases for many of the programs that they have. They have not been adjusted in some of them in decades. So I just wanted to make sure that you all are aware that there are some revenue proposals in here and that those details are going to follow. These are all of the various pieces of legislations that will be coming before you. The only one I think I want to draw your attention to that was not mentioned previously is the Emergency Communications Center. You all may not know that they are not an official department by ordinance. Instead, when they consolidated operations, they created an MOU, and that department is actually managed by a group of other department heads, the police chief, the fire chief, the OEM director. So we feel that that department has been operating as a true standalone department, and that needs to be finalized. So you'll see some legislation to finalize and create them as an official department of the city. The capital spending plan, the mayor's dropped you all some hints, but that's all you're going to get today. The actual filing will be May 13th, and we will have the details on the capital spending plan at that time. There's a lot in this presentation that has not been discussed. We have worked very, very closely with Chairman Pridemore on preparing for your hearings. We will be presenting some new information to you all that you have not had in prior years. And we look forward to working with you all. And I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Talia. As passion call you by. We will at this time open up the floor to council members to anyone has any questions. Councilman Davis. Scott Davis.
Very good job. You and your staff and all the department heads and all the people who work for the department heads. Very good job. I have a question regarding to the increase in sales tax revenue. At the pace that we're going now, and looking at years, a couple years ahead, as let's say, as we mentioned briefly this week, that perfect storm, Stanley Cup and CMA Fest happening at the same time, when you have large crowds of people here over what we were expecting, spending money. You've been asking each department for a 3-year plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, let's say we get a year and a half from here, and we're seeing that the tourism has gone up tremendously, even higher because of the perfect storm and other things that may happen in the city. Could we look at, I know, and I'm super excited about the increase in wages of the Metro employees because they're very important to all of us, but can we start looking with those projections at possibly trying to get them up to a higher rate? In other words, I like where we are right now, but if we can keep the foot on the gas and keep that money rolling in here, is there a strong possibility that maybe a year and a half from now or even 8 months from now, looking like, hey, we had a great year again, can we increase it another 4%?
Yeah, I would say that the Deloitte study recommendations that are mentioned in here, that gets us to market. Okay, so any increases in this budget above that is gravy right now. But I mean, as we move, this mayor is absolutely committed to keeping employees, though, at the top of her list. And I will assure you that in future budgets, they will be taken care of.
Is that all you have, Councilman?
Yeah, one more. You'll probably be seeing some requests. I know we all have a lot of great schools in our community, but some of us will be asking for additional equipment. I know in the past that we've had some minor concerns with, hey, I've ordered a new sign for a particular school, and we put it in the budget, but the sign didn't get there, or they did a refurbished sign instead of a new one. Will there be some wiggle room for additional things like that? Because I know there's a couple of schools out there, especially one in my community, where we're looking at a new bleacher repair or a few other things. I'm sure a lot of great council people have minor things that they would love to add or put on the proverbial wish list too.
Yeah, most of those will come through the capital spending plan and the capital improvements budget. And to the extent that it's on school property, we would have to communicate with the school board to make sure that it's on their prioritized list. But on Metro's side, we will absolutely consider the council's requests and prioritizing any allocation, if it's a street sign or what have you.
And one final thing. Looking at the increase in traffic and the growth, I know that your department and Public Works have been looking at innovative ways of, having traffic move faster. You'll probably be seeing a few requests, on Gallatin Road and some of the major corridors that have expanded. And I just want to thank you and the Public Works Department for the traffic lights. And I want to thank my colleagues who also advocated for those traffic lights, Anthony, Nancy, and Brett, and several others. And as you see, as the growth happens and hopefully more tax revenue and more sales tax revenue get in here, just the combination of, when even Nolensville Pike, which is growing now, seeing those requests for those crosswalks, because as the more restaurants come, more hotels, more apartments, more housing, we're going to be increasing those requests. So thank you for providing those things for us.
I agree. I mean, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is absolutely keeping up with the growth so that people not only come, but they want to stay.
Councilman Pardue?
Yep, thank you, Talia, for being here to help us out with this mess. I've got a question and a request. On the pay plan, I mean, it looks like it's going to be a whole lot more for a lot of people than 3.1%. Is there any way we can find out who they are? I mean, people are kind of confused. Am I getting
Yes.
my increment and the raise, and who else is getting it?
When that pay plan is approved, all of those employees will be notified, and the HR department is actually required to submit you all kind of pay schedules for every class of position that's out there, so that will provide you some guidance as well. But when I say that they have done a great job and they have any level of detail that you request,
Right.
that is true.
And I'd like to know if you have the information with you today or not. Can you tell me what a 1% pay raise would cost the city?
I might have that in here. Let me see. I may have just bought that with me.
What did you ask, Councilman?
What it would cost us for a 1% more?
An increase over and above?
Right, just a 1% increase.
It's about $5 million.
Thank you. And I'm through.
Councilor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director.
Stand by, went off, I'm sorry. Okay, now try it.
Yes, I just want to tell you, I'm really excited to approve this budget. I don't have a question. I don't have a lot of comments. I'm really thrilled and was really excited to hear the mayor at the State of Address. And I know that you all worked hard on it. I do feel like it's equitable. It's parity. It shows a lot of parity, and it's definitely thoughtful. And so when we go out here to approve this budget, I told everyone already, you don't have to worry about me. I feel really strongly about the budget, and I really mean that. And so when I go out amongst the constituents, I do feel like there's something in here for everybody. It may not be perfect, but there's definitely something in there, and definitely the employees have been taken care of, which is really positive. And some of those areas that have been left out for many years in terms of infrastructure, there's something there. And our youth are definitely important to us, and I like that goal, and I'm going to do everything I can to help her reach that goal of 10,000 jobs in 2017. So I just wanted to commend you, the mayor, and the office, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Johnson. There's not much room to operate. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Primore and Director Lomax O'Neill. I also want to commend Mayor Megan Berry and her entire staff for an outstanding budget. It's so much more clarity with this budget than what I have experienced in the past, even though Rich Riebling is excellent. I think you've just taken a little bit up a notch, and I really appreciate the teamwork of you and Rich in making this so much easier to understand. The questions that I have are around the youth programs. I'm excited because I think that was a big thing when I was on the school board. We really wanted to push more after-school programs and job opportunities because that's where we're missing the beat. And I think the mayor focusing on that is commendable. But when you say the after-school programs, I think you said that they were going to be expanded. Did you say to 28 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Does that include additional NASA sites?
It will be the same sites. They're just extending the weeks.
Okay, is there an opportunity to expand some of the NASA sites? One reason I'm asking is because is there an incremental plan to expand that? Because many of my constituents and people in Southeast would like to see Kennedy Middle School as one of the NASA sites.
Okay. I'll put that down. I don't know if there's a current expansion plan. There is? Okay. Do you know what that is?
You know that. This year's request was to expand the number of operating weeks. And I think they plan to come back next year with expanded into more areas.
Okay.
And so they thought it was important this year to increase the calendar. And so that's what we funded. And I think you'll see next year a plan to take it into more areas.
Now, is there a communication plan in terms of us as council members being able to send out the employment opportunities that we're seeking to fill with our youth? Because I'm excited about that and I want to send it out. Is that a yes?
That's an absolute yes.
Okay. I had to go by my little pages here. Hold on. Give me a second. Okay, the library openings, you mentioned that I missed some of them because you were talking pretty fast, Ms. Lomax O'Neill. You said Richland, Donaldson, Goodlettsville, and what else did you say?
Englewood and Thompson Lane. In the current year, just for perspective, we opened 7, and I'll just go ahead and say what those are for Fridays. Bordeaux, Hermitage, Bellevue, Green Hills, Madison, Southeast, and Edmondson.
And in terms of the transportation and infrastructure plan on page 18, what's specifically of interest, I think, to me and the people in my area is the planning and land development staffing. One of the things as a council member that I think would be very advantageous to us is for us to have consideration of having one of those positions, because we face a tremendous obstacle in terms of representing our constituents in front of the Planning Commission. And so I just want to put that out there as a recommendation to consider and look at as to those new positions. And then finally on Public Works, I have to echo my colleague, Councilman Scott Davis, that I am very excited about the crosswalks, because that has been the #1 request that I have seen over my past 4 years. And what I would like also to ask is infill sidewalks a priority? Because I know we're trying to catch up on sidewalks and do new sidewalk projects, but will there be a specific focus on infill sidewalks? Because like, for instance, you have a street where there's one part of the street that has a sidewalk, then the next part doesn't, then the next part does, and then the next part doesn't. I have a couple of streets in my area that are that way.
It's my understanding that Public Works is reviewing all of that criteria right now to establish those priorities. So I think it would be premature for me to jump in and kind of say where I thought those priorities would lie at the end of that process.
Thank you so much. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Bedney.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Sorry about that. I have a question about the whole tax. We just were blessed with another gift from the state legislature in cutting our revenue. I wanted to know where in this charge where the money comes from. Where is that money?
That would be revenue into Metro. We have accounted for that in our revenue estimates. So any loss of revenue there has been accounted for.
So the cut of $14 million for this budget year is already reflected in this projection?
Well, no, it's not. It's not $14 million. That's, I think, what it's supposed to be if they do a complete repeal. Mm-hmm. It was significantly less than that. So our revenue estimates were adjusted for what we think the impact will be in FY17.
Okay, so you are already projecting that in here?
Yes, we got that news before we had to file it.
Thank you.
Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman Pridemore, Director O'Neill. I have 3 questions I'd like for you to address with me, Ms. Lomax. I understand from being out on the trail that our firefighters' equipment has not been upgraded in a number of years, and I don't know exactly what is falling, what falls into the budget. Will you address whether or not they have made requests for updated firefighter equipment? The second area I'd like you to talk about is the funding for the farmers market and the funding for the fair. Now, I noticed that we have in our subsidies that we're going to allow the state fair to balance, but there's a difference between our Nashville fair and the fairgrounds and state fair. So if you can touch on those three subjects, I may have a follow-up, but I'd like you to address each one of them.
The firefighter equipment, I can tell you that they have requested equipment in their budget. They have requested that in the capital plan as well as 4% funds. And if you all recall, any 4% allocations come back to you during the year for allocation back to departments. So it won't be a part of this operating budget submission, but I can tell you that.
Known to us?
Yes, I can
Okay.
get you the list. We can share the list with you.
Okay. And can you also indicate the last time that they made a request or had appropriation for equipment? Because my understanding is that they hadn't been funded in quite some time as it relates to equipment.
No, they make a request every single budget year.
Okay.
And every single budget year, we allocate 4% dollars to them for equipment. So they have received allocations every fiscal year that I've been here.
Okay. Okay. And I guess next you can go to funding for the farmers market. And the $1 million you're talking about is from the sale, well, the compensation for the leased property, but I mean,
Yes.
outside of that, their normal budget.
Yes. What they have requested, or what is recommended in this budget, if you all recall, they sold that property for $4 million. And at the time of that sale, we committed that $1 million of that would be set aside for an operating reserve, because we knew that they would have some initial losses in their operations while they were trying to get geared back up, and the remaining $3 million would be allocated toward capital. So what this budget funds is it provides them the $1 million allocation for their operating reserve for FY17, so that they have use of that, and they will use that to cover everything from employee raises to utilities to janitorial to security to whatever the needs of the market are during the fiscal year.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
In terms of the state fair, you mentioned that, and
Right.
the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds has submitted a proposal where basically they are going to operate within the revenues that they expect to generate during the fiscal year without any additional subsidy from the city, so that they will be self-sustaining. That is their proposal.
What is the difference between our Nashville Fairgrounds and the state fair funding?
The Nashville Fairgrounds is the property out there. There's a state fair organization that was actually created by state law. There's a state fair association, and I don't know some of you guys are probably more familiar with that association than me, but there's this other body called the State Fair Association that really is not a metro entity or a metro organization at all.
Okay.
Councilman, it's called the State Fair. It's a commission, and they have a board of commissioners, and they are appointed by the state, and they're basically in charge of the state fair. All we do is supply we negotiate the use of the property, but they are in control of the state fair, but that has nothing to do with metro government.
Okay. Well, so the fairgrounds hadn't submitted requests for funding at all? I mean, the race and the whole bit about funding the fairgrounds, that?
Yes, they've submitted their operating budget for running the fairgrounds.
Okay. And is that the same as it was last year?
There's probably, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a little bit higher than it was in FY16. I don't have the numbers right in front of me.
Okay.
But again, that any increase in their budget is being funded by additional revenues being brought in by the fairgrounds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Elrod.
Thank you, Chairman Pridemore. Thank you, Ms. Lomax O'Neill, and thank you to administration, the mayor's office. I think y'all did a great job of prioritizing and really getting the spirit of what I think a lot of us ran to be on this council. And I think one of those, I don't think is stated a lot of times, but we're up here to serve the public, but the employees that work for Metro government also serve the public. And I think when we make investments in physical buildings, I think the people that also staff those buildings, the staff for Metro government that serve the public, I think that's a great investment to make. So I appreciate that. And also the commitment to public safety and youth. I think the mayor has done a great job in investing in youth programs. A few questions, and if I'm incorrect, please don't hesitate to correct me. In some of the discussions with the relocation of the jail facilities to Harding, there was, I think, discussions, I believe, from some of the sheriff's staff about need additional operating expenses for staff. Am I correct in that, or am I wrong?
The sheriff actually requested no additional funding in this budget for that move.
Okay. And then, and also, I appreciate, I talked about it at the last 4% resolution, the honest budgeting that, we're subsidizing the farmer's market from that fund, but then the auditorium, I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much, because I think if we're going to have a budget for the year, we need to be honest with not only ourselves, but with the public of what is going on with those facilities. So I greatly appreciate that. And I also appreciate the 3-year budgeting that way we can look, see what different departments are needing. Are those, 3-year budget projections, are those something that will be provided to us to see what would be coming for the different departments?
At this time, we can share with you the requests that they had, but of course, we can't commit to the outer years.
Oh, sure, absolutely, absolutely. And also, and this is, I don't know if this is even possible. I know it's a lot of the revenue that came in this year was the levels were unexpected. Is there any kind of projections as far as revenues also of what? And I'm not trying to spend next year's money already or the year after's, but has there been any attempt at all to look at the 3-year projections also for revenue growth?
We have looked at that at a high level because, of course, when we put in $120 million, we got to be careful.
Yes.
Because you want to make sure that revenue is going to be there the next year. So we have been, even though those numbers appear to be really, really high, they are actually very, very conservative.
Interesting. And then I'll just be looking also forward to the capital improvement budgets process and seeing about those sidewalks and really how much investment. Not necessarily we all want sidewalks in our district and road improvements, but seeing how much of investment that's going to be going. So I appreciate. Thank you to you and all of your staff. Really, thank you.
Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director. And it's a great day in the fiscal history of Nashville to have a $100 million increase year to year. But a quick question, if you would comment on the pension liability funding and whether the new comp plan, how that affects that, and sort of the projections for being as solvent as we have been on that plan. Thanks.
Okay. There isn't any additional contribution to that liability, but we are well funded in our perspective. 94.5% funded there. The pay plan really doesn't impact that pension liability number in the short term, at least, and you'd have to have the actuaries go in there to see what long-term impact that may have on that pension liability. That has not been done. But something that I didn't mention today is our pension contribution rate. You will get some information in the budget on our pension contribution rate for FY17. It's dropping significantly, and this recommended budget will actually be dropping from about 15.5% to about 12.3%. There's some good stuff in this budget, Councilman.
Councilman Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Director Lomax and to our great mayor and actually, Director, you were sitting right in front of me, giving me number one, number two, number three to my community concerns with this upcoming budget. But actually, I just wanted to touch base, and I don't know if we, excuse me, have all the information as of now to where we can express, and you can answer this question for me. But looking into the public investment plan, and it talks about the 14 programs, if you give a stab at that to help me to understand what are these chosen 14 programs that we're looking at?
Those that received funding will get notification right after this meeting today. But I will share with you some of the plans that were submitted. One is called the Hub. You have a fellow council member on the floor that helped put together that proposal, and that is to develop a constituent relationship management system to provide ways for the citizen to track activity throughout the whole city, any given pothole, any given event, real time, live. I mean, it's an exciting proposition, and probably one of the public investment plans that had the most energy around it from the panel when they presented. So, Council Lady, thank you.
Well,
and Lionel.
yeah, I thank you for it. That's only one, and I know you probably want to not open up Pandora's box on the rest of that.
Some of those people are in the back just hanging on.
Yeah. I'm quite sure. So,
Councilman, you will get your opportunity though when they come up for the budget.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll let that one go. I just wanted to ask one of the other things, because I don't want the room to toss upside down. We also looking at the schools, and I know Councilman Davis was speaking of that. I know the state of Tennessee legislation just helped us out as a county body, as allowing us the opportunity to, and it was sponsored by Representative Harold Love, being able to set forth on individual schools within our districts to where we can either put more funding in periodically for that. I spoke to him recently about that, and it will be of the individual council choice on what that would be. I don't have all the information, but I'm sure we will be receiving that soon. But the last portion is the sector on the libraries. I just received a phone call on yesterday evening, and I told you today several of my constituents are calling, and one is a retired Metro school, not a school, but a Metro librarian for many years, and her daughter is a librarian as well. But there are some libraries that are in the North Nashville sector. Not the ones that are not necessarily in my district, but we have others that are part of this plan. Do we have any, I know we have some things that are picked out right now for renovation or for expansion, but are there any other areas or any other funding that is there for any other additional process that we're looking at?
That'll be a part of the capital spending plan, but I can share with you that Kent Oliver, who is the public library director, recently completed a master planning. He went through a master planning exercise for all libraries in the city, and that report is publicly available. And it has some information around where libraries are needed, what types of repairs are needed, and things like that. So I will ask him to share that with this body, so that you all have access to it. It's probably on his website already. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director, and all the work that your staff has done. I have two very quick questions. One is on the Nolensville BRT light service. My guess is that's just funding it for the year that what's the service that was launched.
Yes, we had only funded a half year in the current budget.
Okay. That's been a phenomenal service. I'm glad to see that it's funded. And the second one was on the codes and planning increase of $492,000, and it looks like, is all of that going to staffing?
Yes, between both departments.
Okay. Do we have any idea, estimate-wise, of how many additional employees that is?
I do. I've got that.
Oh, great.
Codes is maybe, I think Codes has 3 employees, and planning maybe has 3 or 4.
Okay.
Okay.
That's great to hear. That's those departments are very overworked. They're very dedicated, but the additional staff will be very beneficial. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Councilman Anthony Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick because I know everyone's probably ready to get out of here. But thank you again for all the hard work you and your staff have done. I think we've got some great things in here. It's really great when times are good. And I think you guys have made some really common sense decisions on where to spend the extra revenue. So I really appreciate it. Excited about the employee investments, of course. One thing I never know the right time to ask this, but I was going to ask about have you guys, with all the employee investments and that sort of thing, have you looked at maternity and paternity leave for employees and that sort of thing?
We are absolutely looking at that. That is something that the mayor has asked us to look into very carefully to see what we can do.
Yeah, wonderful. Someone has brought up to me recently, so that's the reason I'm asking. But yeah, and I didn't realize we didn't have a lot going on for that. So look forward to hearing more on that. And I know, you guys will come up with something good, of course. But again, thank you so much, and I'm really excited to do our deliberations with the different departments as we move forward and look at your capital spending plan as well, and hope for a good budget cycle this time. But really great stuff. Thank you.
Councilman Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director Lomax O'Neill. This is my first budget, so please bear with me if this is the inappropriate time to ask this particular question. But it's gratifying to see that some of our other revenue streams are increasing so much in Nashville, and that as a share of that, property tax is going down. However, with the reassessment coming up, some of our neighbors, particularly selfishly, but in East Nashville and some areas of the city, are going to be finding themselves having a larger tax bill, even though it's revenue neutral to the city. So I'm interested in hearing about a little bit more, if you're able to share that at this time, about what efforts are in the budget or that we could look at maybe for future budgets, but for property tax relief or for Metro Action Commission services or things like that, just to help some of our neighbors stay in their homes. Obviously, with home values rising as dramatically as they are, that's a great asset, but they don't realize that benefit until they sell, and many of us are interested in trying to get our neighbors there in place. So any information you can share on that would be helpful.
Included in this budget is money for the assessor's office to complete the reappraisal. It will not have an impact on this budget proposal, but will impact FY18. So when we get through that analysis, I'm sure the mayor will have to consider all revenue options and consider, any adjustments that may be needed to that rate to address those needs in the community. But this upcoming year is when we'll be doing that analysis.
Council Lady Bircher.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say this is a great budget as well. This is my first budget, and thank you, Director, and the Mayor's office. I'm just going back through and just want to make sure, just to get some confirmation that my notes are actually correct. So the hospital authority for FY17, they indicated that they will not need any additional funding for fiscal year 17.
That is correct.
Okay, and then my second confirmation with the relocation, the renovation of the CJC with the proposed 3 years, the sheriff has indicated that he will not need any additional funding for that renovation as well, the relocation.
The sheriff committed that he did not need additional resources in FY17.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Riebling, this you think how easy this was and how difficult it was in the previous years due to the budget reduction that feels like you just kind of missed the opportunity to take some of the accolades. I want to thank you, though, for all the hard work that you did.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Riebling as well.
Also, want to thank everyone out, the members of the different departments that were here with us today and staying with us. We're looking forward to the council's budget session, and which starts May the 9th. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. But looking at this budget, the mayor's budget, it seems it may not be as difficult maybe as in years past, Mr. Riebling. So, Director, it may be easy sailing for you this time. You would hope, but I know that's not going to be the case. If there's not any other questions, though, we want to thank you for being here. Would you like to say anything?
I'd just like to say to all those departments in the back that are waiting anxiously, you will start to get your highlights this afternoon, so you'll know it's in the recommended budget.
Well, thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.